It's been a few months since sitting in first class on United together. I don't know about you, but I'm itching to get on an airplane again.
I do remember, though, you made a comment about my scotch,
That's true.
and then I had a quick comeback, and we won't go into the details.
Truth be told, when I was a child, if you asked me what I wanted to be, and my parents will tell you this to this day, my passion was to be an astronaut. But today I have the privilege to have an astronaut for a friend, and I'm going to introduce you to him, Colonel Greg Johnson.
Well, I was a military brat. During that time, there was always airplanes flying around, so I was in an environment to get excited about airplanes. Probably one of the big moments that kind of, planted the seed for that dream happened when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. And I just could not believe that a person was actually walking on the surface of the moon.
Yeah.
I was inspired, Jeff.
Yeah.
And then I went outside, I looked at the moon, and I could not believe that a person was actually stepping on the surface.
Your brain stretched at the thought, yeah.
And, and the funny thing is, I didn't think it was very likely, but it was a dream. I didn't say no to that dream, which is what I tell kids. Don't say no to things, because that'll never happen.
Yeah, right.
I just said, hey, I'd like it to happen. My brother and sister scoffed at me a little bit, but the seed was planted. I was a fighter pilot, and I met the future NASA administrator. He had just flown one flight in the shuttle, Charlie Bolden.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, you're a fighter pilot, you went to the academy and got some technical degrees. Why don't you go be a test pilot? That's the next step for a guy like you. That's what I did. The man was right, and I worked super hard at Edwards and eventually got selected to be in the astronaut corps. So.
Wow. Now you're in the astronaut corps, and a lot of, when you were in training, some interesting events happened and some that were tragic. Obviously, speaking of Columbia, can you share a little bit with our viewers some of the lessons learned, or that opportunity for the right time for creative, on-the-spot, critical thinking while on orbit?
So, the one that really comes to mind was not one of the flights that I was on. It was STS-120.
Okay.
And on that flight, I think STS-120 is probably the closest analogy to what happened on Apollo 13, where they really had to think outside of the box to try to innovate very quickly and solve the problem. So I think every time we have these learning experiences, we grow and innovate, and I think that's how you become better.
I'm curious, talk to us a little bit about what risk management for you personally, since it's your rear end in the cockpit, what that looked like for you, being that you're flying, but there's an ocean of engineers that may or may not be telling you everything that they know or are in search of, and how you manage your emotions and the induced stress of all of that so that you can still execute.
Well, it's more about focusing on the one problem that you can solve and not getting caught up in going down a rabbit hole with some of those secondary things that are all connected to this central thing. And what I've found is following that advice in a tough situation is when you attack with focus on the center of gravity of a problem, all the secondary pieces will be weakened and will follow.
I got to say, not to blow sunshine up a spacesuit here, but one of the things that I've always found very humbling talking to you was recognizing that while that had all been going down, you were not on the rotation for a flight, but it wasn't long afterwards when you were put on a flight roster. And I've always been curious, having gone through that gut-wrenching experience, having a family, a young family going through it, how difficult was that inside your head, the voices in your head, so to speak? And what was that conversation like with your family as you planned to say yes to go fly Endeavour after everything you all had gone through?
Well, it was easy for me. Some people will skydive, others won't because they just won't accept that risk.
Right.
And so before I got my foot into a jet and pilot training, before I got into a combat fighter, and before I went into the space shuttle, There was no doubt in my military mind that it was as safe as it was going to be, and I absolutely was going to accept the risk.
Right.
So I was comfortable.
Right.
As far as my kids and my wife, they didn't have the advantage of having that information that I had. So I did feed it to them on a continual basis because I knew it was coming. Right. Eventually, I was going to have that first space flight, and it was 2008 by the time I had it. So we had a little bit of time during the return to flight period to my flight, where I was kind of tailoring the landscape.
Right. So even on orbit, marital communication is a design parameter everyone needs to think about. Is that the
yes.
the lesson?
We all have a pecking order.
I love it.